Hey guys, how are you?
Howdy.
So regarding the SGA's request of standards for on or remote learning, I was just thinking as a psychologist, like there's no way I can focus on teaching and interacting with students and keep remembering to turn my mic on and off.
Yeah, I got I don't know, not chastised, but there were students using the chat function today, and you know, it was like, oh, sorry, I missed your chat, and then 10 minutes later, oh, there was another chat, missed that, sorry. You know, it's about the best I can do.
Yeah. There are some students that sit behind the screen. So I can't, if it pops up on the screen, I don't see it.
Yep.
You know, I feel like I can't do that many tasks at once. I think at least in my situation, it's better if students say something. And even then, when the machine comes on, it's always set at the lowest volume level. And so unless I remember to turn the volume up, I'm not going to hear them.
I did learn a good trick today, which is that you can turn the settings so that the chat pops up on the big screen.
Okay.
So then I'm more likely to notice it than the little red light on the little screen.
Yeah. So sometimes I do see it, but if it pops up, are you saying it like leaves the whole feed there?
Yeah. So ordinarily it just pops up for a second and I usually miss it. But if you change it, you can change that setting so that it leaves the whole list of chats there on the screen on the right.
So the gallery view was something else they talked about. And I don't know if it's because of the way I'm doing it, but I don't have a gallery option in mind.
Right. No, you can't do the gallery view if you're presenting content with those polygons.
Okay, well that's always
which
a
is
problem.
too bad. That would be really nice.
Yeah, especially if we could see them on the side, kind of like in a Zoom.
Yep. I would like that.
Kristen, I saw that you said you're listening in. I hope you're well and I miss you. Ugh.
Hello,
I wish they would tell us, like, hi. I wish if there were problems with what we're doing or if a student has a concern with what they were doing, they would say something to us versus do a mass email. I feel like I waste too much time thinking, is that me? Is that me?
I just kind of put it out there. I was like, okay, I don't know if you guys can hear me. If there's a problem, just let me know because I can't do it all.
Yeah. I had done a survey of my, like an anonymous survey in Canvas of my upper level psychology class just to see what's going well and what I could change. And none of it had to do with Zoom, so.
Yeah, I usually wait
like
until midterm.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I think you're smart to do it early with all this changes and stuff.
I put it in my online course too, but it's at week 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And it's optional, so if they have nothing to say, they don't have to say anything.
All right, it's 4 o'clock, but lots of people are still dinging in here. I'm getting dings everywhere, so we'll wait a little bit.
Would you like to grade some papers for me while you're waiting?
Considering the last chemistry class I had was in 10th grade, that would be an interesting experiment.
You just need to have a key, right?
There you go.
I would just give it to my wife.
There
She's
you
a
go.
chemist.
I'll hold the baby. You grade the papers.
Ooh.
Fair deal.
Tiffany's always outside. I guess that she won't be able to keep that up much longer.
Oh, we'll just see about that. I was inside all day so far.
Yep, gotta change the pace.
Yeah, the sun kind of came out, so
All right, I think we're all pretty much here. I see a couple people who haven't made an appearance yet. But let's get started because it's 4:02 and I always like to reward people who are on time. So keep in mind that I am going to be sending out probably early next week, I'm going to be canceling the Zoom invitations that are out there right now, and I'll be sending out new ones soon because of that issue of having to add the passcode. So don't panic about that if you see all the meetings being canceled. They'll reappear, believe me. Also, Chris might mention this in his presentation, but he will be sending you guys a survey probably early next week that will ask you to identify which of the tools that he's gone over in Tools, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 is today, of course. And that will help us determine the agendas for future meetings. So be sure to respond promptly to that survey when Chris sends it out. We don't have a set topic for next week yet. I have a steering committee meeting on Monday, and we will determine that. And I'll either let you know, or you can just show up next Friday and be ready to be blown away by something. So I will turn it over to Chris. This is going to be the second part of the Tools presentation. So take it away, Chris.
Oh, before you do that, I just wanted to say that you can go into your Zoom meetings and just edit them, and you won't have to send anything to anybody. It stays the same. The only thing that you're doing is you're just changing your room, that you're going to check the room. I've been able to do that with my own classes, so I just pass that along.
Okay, thank you, Thayer.
Sorry to interrupt.
All righty. So how is everybody? Y'all doing all right? Look like a happy
Great,
bunch of
thanks.
rectangles. All right. So let's get rolling. We're all defined by our shape now, right? I think Zoom needs to institute the possibility of changing your shape. I'd like to be a pentagon if at all possible. That would be nice. All right. So, right, exactly. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. We are going to hop back into the Tools, and More Tools handout. As Paul said, when this is all said and done, sometime over the weekend, no later than Monday, you're going to be receiving an email from me for a SurveyMonkey survey that will give you a chance to give some feedback on the workshop, as well as identify either some categories or some specific tools or some areas related to the tools that you might want to have us spend some more time on over the course of this particular semester. Obviously, it can encompass the tools that I personally cover here, as well as the tools I don't cover. Anything that you've explored in the handout on your own that you're like, hey, I'd like to know more about that, we can do that. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. I'm going to take over the sharing the screen. When I share the screen, the Zoom functionality gets minimized quite a bit, even though I have a nice big 30-inch screen in front of me. Everybody gets really small. And so if you're in the chat, I probably won't see it. So I'll pause in between categories and just ask if there's any questions, okay? Okay. All right, I just don't want anything to pop up in that SGA etiquette thing again. All right, so let's take over the screen, sharing desktop. Turning on sound, yada, yada, yada. All right, so let's take over. Okay, let's get rid of this. All right, so somebody tell me, can they see this here? Can you see the handout? Yes? Yes.
Yep, can see it.
All
Yep,
right,
I can
pulls up
see it.
loose. All right, let's roll. So we left off with mapping tools. We got about halfway down. Did we cover the mapping tools or did I stop before the mapping tools? I've actually given this presentation 3 times this week to different groups, so I kind of don't remember.
I think you stopped before the mapping tools, Chris. That's my recollection.
All
I
right,
had
excellent.
it at defont.com.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So
Graphic.
yeah. So we stopped right before the mapping tools. Okay, so let's hop into mapping tools. Now, of course, mapping can refer to a variety of different types of maps. And some of the tools that are shown here aren't just your typical geographical maps. They also map out a variety of other things. So the first one we're going to start with here is Coggle. And so Coggle looks like this. Now, of course, you're all familiar with what a mind map is, right? I'm sure you've used them in class maybe, or you yourself have been part of them. You know, the sort of the visual equivalent to the word association game, right? I say cheeseburger and then I go Paul, and then he says cheese, and then somebody else says ketchup, and so on and so forth. And you say the first thing that pops into your mind. Mind mapping, of course, is sort of a visual equivalent to that. It allows you to create sort of visual connections between ideas, concepts, words, and whatnot. The nice thing about Coggle is that you can create a free online account and it allows you to create these sort of visual mind maps and then invite people to sign in and share it with you and therefore contribute to the building of your mind map. And as you can see by these examples that they show, they're not only they don't only function with just words, but you can also insert things like graphics and a variety of other things. There's different ways to do them, of course, and if we sort of zoom in on one here, you can see that they're really big and super functional. You can invite groups of people to come work on them. Everybody gets their own color coding. They can name themselves and they can sort of add to the process. You can do all sorts of things, including share it not only with people on Coggle, but outside of Coggle. And it's a good way to sort of document progress on ideas. And as we go through the examples here, you can see that they can get really complex. And I know that Coggle does allow you to insert links to videos, links to other websites, photographs, graphics, you name it. So it's a pretty versatile mind mapping tool, as you can see here. Okay, so that is Coggle. The next one I want to show you is StoryMap. StoryMap is a presentation tool at its heart, but it is sort of a map-based geographic presentation tool. So basically the way it works is it allows the users to upload any map of your choice, and we're gonna assume that it's a free-to-use map that you are allowed to use. You are not infringing upon anybody's copyright. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But let's say you upload your map, and then you create that as the basis of your presentation. And then you go through using the StoryMap software and you drop pins, location pins, anywhere you want along the map that will tell the story that you want to tell. So as you can see this example here on their website, you know, this is United States westward expansion from the East Coast to the West Coast over a period of time, and they drop in certain pins along the way. Now let's look at an example of an actual active one down here, and they don't have to be realistic, of course, they can be entirely fictitious. So we'll hop into the old Game of Thrones map here. I have not actually watched Game of Thrones, so I don't know anything about it, but I hear it's popular. Okay, so this here is Arya's journey on Game of Thrones, and you can see that somebody uploaded a Game of Thrones location map, and it's fully interactive. You can scroll through it by simply handing your way through it. And then the creator of this map went and dropped certain pins, and you can tell by the icons that are present on the pins that some of the content are text-based, some are YouTube video-based, some are photography-based. Now you can make your way through the presentation either by starting with the progressive arrows on the side of the screen here, or you can simply click into one of the pins and it will zoom in and show you the content of that particular pin. Now, a pin in this particular case is essentially just a slide, and you would then build the content of the slide based on what you wanted to present. So you can put in some typographic information, there's a header, there's some body copy, there's a background photograph, and so on and so forth. Now you can progress to the next location on the map by either hitting the arrow, or you can scroll your way through the map in a more of a non-linear way and just bounce around to the next location that you think is interesting. So if we click on this one, you can see that again, it has a place for text, but there's an actual spotted photograph. We can click on this one here, and that will take us to a slide that involves a video. So there's an embedded YouTube video. All you have to do is get the YouTube URL code from its location and drop it in. So Story Map is a great way to give a presentation that happens to be geographically centric, right? And it can work with any sort of map that you can upload. Okay, so that takes care of mapping. Let's move down to the next category. So speaking of presentations, we'll talk about presentation tools. Now, most of these we are familiar with. Now, you'll notice that Microsoft PowerPoint is not here because it's later on in the handout under the entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem. But of course, PowerPoint is the granddaddy of presentation tools, right? Slide-based presentation tools. Google Slides is sort of a simplified version of that, free through your Google collection of software. Apple makes their own version of something like PowerPoint called Keynote, which is sort of the opposite of simplifying. It's more complex and more graphical than PowerPoint is, if you can actually believe that. And then, of course, there's other tools like we mentioned Adobe Spark last time around. Part of the Adobe Spark system of software also includes Adobe Video, which is really just a video-based presentation tool. But all of those tools are what you would call slide-based. You fill out a slide, you move on to the next slide, and it's sort of a linear presentation, right? So the thing I want to point out here is Prezi. Now, you're probably familiar with Prezi because it's been around for a little while. But the thing about Prezi is that it's more of a dynamic, visually based interactive presentation tool. And this example here, this one is on different types of literature and whatnot. You can see that it starts out with a pretty interesting graphic, but as you hover over different areas of the graphic, they become sort of hot points, right? And when you click on them, Prezi zooms you in further into that section of the presentation as if you were unpeeling an onion. And then you can get closer and closer into it and explore new things as you zoom your way through it until you get to the lowest point in that area of the presentation, and then you can sort of back out of it again and move over to other sections. Now, Prezi is kind of a real three-dimensional dynamic way to present information that, you know, presents relationships between the categories in your presentation in a slightly different way than sort of your typical linear presentation. It can be super interesting, and obviously the type of graphics that you're using here can be really diverse. Now, Prezi offers a whole bunch of pre-designed templates that would give you access to some really nicely designed things. So it's not as if you have to create all these graphics from scratch, although you could if you wanted to, but the templates are pretty great. Now, the one criticism I hear of Prezi occasionally is that when you present these types of presentations in sort of a dark room on a really big screen, some people have reported getting a little motion sickness because of all the swooping and zooming that happens. But independent of that, it is a pretty good tool. Okay. So before we move on to the next category, any questions about either mapping tools or presentation tools? Feel free to just unmic yourself and go. Or rather, unmute yourself. Unmiking.
I have a question, Chris.
Hit me.
So the mapping tools, do they, I mean, or I guess this is maybe a general question, do they all have you say if you had the students do something in a class, are the students all going to be tracked and everything, like their data and everything?
Well, no, because, I mean, yes and no. So one of the things that's at the beginning of this handout is sort of a series of questions that sort of get you to think about like what happens with the data that these websites are collecting from you. So in that way, yes, through your IP address and through your usage of these things, and based on whatever personal information you give them in signing up for access, yeah, they track you, mostly for advertising purposes. But of course, there's a whole longer discussion to be had about that. But as far as mapping tools tracking you from a GPS perspective, no, not really. The only one here that would do that is like, say, Google Maps. if you were accessing it through a mobile device. And the reason I put Google Maps on here is not for your typical GPS usage, but because if you sign into Google Maps with your Google account, how many times can you say Google in the same sentence? You can actually, there's sort of a hidden feature of Google Maps where you can make a custom map where you can plot out your own locations and save it as your own personal map. So if you wanted to map out, like, you know, Paul's favorite sandwich shops in the Northeast, which I know he's got a big list,
Right.
you could go ahead and do that. But that's the only reason I add that in here. Everything else is pretty non-GPS based.
But they would be collecting the data on the students. You said IP, and then if they created a map or something, who they are
Yeah,
if they sign in.
Absolutely. All online based accessible digital tools collect some kind of information from you. If it's a digital tool that doesn't require any sort of sign in, then it's just dropping cookies onto your computer and tracking what your IP address does when you access that site. And of course, if it asks you to sign up using a username or an email, then it has additional information about you that it can then leverage. Sure.
Okay. I guess this is a larger question for both you and the folks who are running the Ideal. So there'll be a discussion later on about the ethics of asking or requiring students to use software that's off of our network that requires them to provide personal information.
Yeah, I think that can absolutely be a discussion in an Ideal and can be one of the things you can mention in the survey I send out in terms of what you want to talk about. Because like I said, this first page in the handout talks exactly about that. Sort of the idea of student agency and knowing how the tools operate and what you're giving away to use them. And I think we can expand it, you know, beyond this single page into a much larger discussion if that's something everybody wants to talk about. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Chris, I have a question on Coggle.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it's an effective tool for discussions, you know, or to enhance the discussion-based questions, you know, say, and, you know, after the question, go and add to the Coggle map.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think it would be effective, what would be the strengths of Coggle and what might be the weaknesses of Coggle in
I
a
think
discussion platform?
Sure, absolutely. I think that mind maps as a tool in general, independent of Coggle, but specific to Coggle in this example, are a good way to get students to use information that they've absorbed, whether it be through, you know, reading assignments or videos you've had them watch or, you know, whatever, and then sort of get that information out quickly without the pressure of feeling like you have to put too much thought into it. You know, if you have them write a paper or reflection paper or whatnot, a lot of times I find personally, students get hung up on the writing process. But when I do mind mapping, I will often, like if I do them in person and I'm not doing it digitally, for example, you know, if I'm just doing it on a whiteboard, I will just line them up and set a timer and just have them go quickly, and just sort of the first thing that pops into their mind, I have them write down. And it just sort of frees them to get the information out, which then highlights the parts of the information that are most important to them. And then we can have that discussion, you know, then we can say, well, why did you write that down? And why did you think that was a good relationship? And you can do the same thing in Coggle in a virtual space. You can certainly give them access to it and then, you know, give them deadlines and time frames that they have to interact so that they don't have too much time to think about it. I just think it's a little more intuitive that way.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. So now the next section is screencasting, which I would love to demonstrate for you, except that I cannot demonstrate a screencasting tool while I'm screencasting. So that doesn't really work the way I would do this in person. However, screencasting tools in general, and you'll see we don't have a big list here, a lot of them are expensive. Like Snagit, for example, is $50, which is one of the cheaper ones I could find here. But Screencast-O-Matic is one of our favorites. We love Screencast-O-Matic. And there is a free version, and there's also a $1.50 a month version, and then you can pay more for more functionality. So that is a great one. And of course, screencasting is pretty much what we're doing here. You can either in a live environment or in a recorded environment, record what you are doing on your computer screen while you are doing it.
Chris, if I can interrupt you for a second on Screencast-O-Matic, we have paid for 50 licenses
Cool.
with Ideal money for the professional version. I don't know if that's the exact name. anyway, the non-free version that has more capabilities. So again, if you're interested in Screencast-O-Matic, you can contact Tom Flanagan and he can set you up with access, because again, we have 50 licenses available.
Yeah, and it's a fabulous tool in that I do online video lectures all the time, and I will set up all my materials on my screen, and kind of similar to what I'm doing here, I will simply run Screencast-O-Matic, and not only does it capture, you can set it up to capture the video of your face, or you can just capture what's going on the screen, or both at the same time, whichever way you want to do it. And it also follows your mouse around. Little yellow animations, little circular animations will highlight when you click on different things on the screen. It will capture the sound of what's going on your screen, not only the computer sounds, but if you're playing a video or whatnot. So it pretty much encompasses the entire environment that's happening on the screen, which you can then upload to YouTube or any other sort of video sharing service, which is fabulous. So Screencast-O-Matic is great. Now, if there's other ones that are also free, if you happen to have an Apple computer, both Apple's QuickTime and their screenshot software, which you can find in their utilities folder, has built into it sort of free screencast software, which does exactly the same thing Screencast-O-Matic does for free. But again, it's Apple only. So if you have a Mac, that's pretty great. But if not, hit up Tom for the Screencast-O-Matic licenses. Any questions on screencasting? Has anybody thought of doing that for their classes now that we sort of live in a hybrid environment? Has anybody done it?
So I was working online over the summer, and I used Screencast-O-Matic for my PowerPoint presentations. I used the free version, which I think gave me, 15-minute presentation, which I'm told not to go longer than that anyway. And the editing versions, the editing opportunities weren't as great as I assumed they would be in maybe the paid for version. But I thought it was very effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to flip the classroom in essence. Virtually, like in my Beatles class, I would do a short lecture and have them watch it. I'd post it in Canvas and have them watch it before we actually got together, so they were primed for a discussion we held. So yeah, it's an excellent tool, and it's quite easy to use.
I used it quite a bit in labs last spring, online when they had to analyze data. And so I had to show them how to use Excel and click on this and go here and now do this. And it was great. It's a great tool now. You show them once and they don't get it when you're live, but if you record it, then they can go back and look at it again. So it's a great tool.
Yeah, that's the feedback I've gotten from my students that they like best, is that, they can just pause it and replay it and get it over and over again. Whereas when I do it in class once, they may not catch all of it, particularly if we have a lot of material to cover in 50 minutes, so it's pretty good. And I joke with them, you get to see the presentation without staring at my face, which is pretty awesome.
Chris, is there some benefit to Screencast-O-Matic over, say, sharing your screen via Zoom? And then obviously you can send out that video recording. What's the benefit to Screencast-O-Matic?
Well, what I like about Screencast-O-Matic, as opposed to just simply recording your Zoom session, and there are benefits to both. Recording the Zoom session has a certain amount of intimacy to it, with everybody there, right? But what I like about using Screencast-O-Matic or any other screencast recording is that it can be a little more scripted. This semester, I am trying to record video lectures where I purposely don't make reference to specific time-related things. Like I won't say on the video, hey, when I saw you last Tuesday, because I want to be able to use these in perpetuity for future classes, because I just cover like what's on the syllabus in week 1, what's on the syllabus in week 2, that kind of a thing. So the fact that I can sort of script them a little bit, I don't actually write a script, but what I'm saying is I can plan them a little better and make them kind of timeless, I think is a good use of it.
Thank you.
Chris, could you then just, I'm not sure if you could do this, create a Zoom meeting of just yourself and record it? And
oh, sure, I've actually done that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just make like a dummy Zoom meeting and then go into it and then hit record, you can just basically sort of record what you're doing yourself. It's a little clunky though, because you will have shots of just an empty Zoom screen, you know, built into it. Whereas with Screencast-O-Matic and other screen capture software, you're really only seeing what's important on the screen. Like when Screencast-O-Matic is on, you don't see Screencast-O-Matic. It's just kind of an invisible tool. Whereas Zoom is going to end up in your camera as you're going through your different windows. It's not that you can't do it, it's just a little less elegant. All right, so let's move on. So we're going to take a look at text analysis. And there's two that I want to look at, Google's Ngram Viewer and Voyant. So you guys are some of you are probably familiar with the Google Book program, where many years ago, Google started digitizing all sorts of books, public domain books, books that have been around for a long time. And so their Ngram Viewer, which is
Can I ask
this
a quick question, Chris? I'm sorry. Did you
Yeah, hit
talk
me.
about Snagit?
Can I talk about Snagit?
Did you talk about it?
Oh, did I talk about Snagit? No, I didn't talk about Snagit because I put it in here just as an example of a kind of affordable screen capture software, but at $50, it's kind of the low end of high. And I don't actually use Snagit, so I don't know much about it, so I don't have too much to say about it.
Okay. Yeah, it seems familiar. I think it was in use like 5 years ago, and I just thought maybe you had something to say about it, but if you don't, that's fine.
No, nothing in particular. I haven't
Okay.
gravitated towards it personally, so I don't have too much to say about it.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, no worries. All right, so back to Ngram Viewer. So Ngram Viewer is intrinsically linked to the Google Book program. And the reason I love this tool is that it's a good demonstrative and discussion-bearing tool for students about certain subjects. I spend a lot of time with my students on research. Before we dive into any kind of design project we're doing, I have them do a lot of research to really get to know it from a bunch of different angles: historical research, relative research, et cetera, et cetera. And so what's great about Ngram Viewer is, let's say that they're working on a project about automobiles, right? And so you can type in, say, Chevrolet, and simply hit return. And over a period of time, and you can go ahead and determine the time period that you want right here, but this is from 1800 all the way to 2019, but you can adjust the time period however you want. You can adjust the language that the books are written in, as well as different categories: British English, English fiction, Chinese simplified, so on and so forth. You can make it case sensitive, et cetera, et cetera. And what it does is it immediately shows you a data visualization of the instances in published books that particular word has appeared. So of course, back in 1800, you're not going to see a whole lot about anything about Chevrolet, but then we get into the early 1900s and you can see the spike in activity and how that particular word appears in published books over time. And really, you know, it gets to its zenith around, you know, the 1960s, right? The early 1960s. And then it starts to wane over time. Now, the tool is you can do it comparatively. So if I want to see the comparative popularity of subject matter related to cars, for example, I could put in Toyota and Hyundai and Mazda. Now I do realize that these words exist outside of the world of automobiles, but bear with me. So you go ahead and hit that and it will crunch the data on it. And it gives you comparative flow lines on all of those words over time. And this opens up sort of discussion, right? So, you know, why is it that Chevrolet is a very popular subject matter of published books through this period of time, through the 40s and 60s, but then it begins to wane and is taken over by, say, Toyota. Meanwhile, Mazda and Hyundai doesn't seem to be nearly as popular as a subject throughout the entire timeline, and you can sort of see how they battle it out. Now, while that's a really fun and interesting data visualization, what's super useful about Ngram Viewer is then you can scroll down here to the Google Books search results, choose the category that you typed in, pick a time frame, and if you want to check out any of the books that were published between, say, 1956 and 1961 on Chevrolet, you can simply click this, and it takes you to every single one of those books, even if it's only on a specific page. Or the book itself. And so you can go through this entire list of books. It'll jump to those specific pages, or if it's the whole book, it'll go to the whole book. And so once you click on the link, and again, this is all through the books.google.com project, it will take you right to that. Go to this one here. This is a pamphlet. So it's a really great resource for getting access to these things through the Google Books program. And you can see there's 4 pages of it here. And then back to the Ngram viewer. So it's pretty interesting. So I like this one a lot. Okay, next, Voyant. Now, Voyant is a text analysis tool for websites. You can also copy and paste actual text into it, but it does its best work on websites. So let's say, for example, you had this website here. This is a great website about Martin Luther King. All you have to do is navigate to your website, copy the URL out of the URL bar at the top here, go back to Voyant, drop in the URL, and then hit reveal. Give it a couple of minutes, and Voyant is going to dissect the website a bunch of different ways. So you can see here that it went ahead and created a nice word cloud based on the amount of usage and how many times the word exists in it. You can see as I hover over different words, it tells me the number of occurrences. There's also this section here that does document segments, and so on and so forth. It breaks it up into a bunch of different ways to break apart and analyze the website from sort of a word point of view. And of course, you can look at it different ways. You can have it swap around, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really great tool. I haven't used this one a whole lot, but if you ever have your students have to sort of dissect, research, or annotate websites, this seems like a really good tool for that. Okay, questions at all about text analysis? All right, moving on. Let's take a look at timeline creation. So timeline creation, kind of like some of the mapping tools, is just another way to create a presentation based on a different criteria other than just linear slides, right? So the mapping tools we looked at helped you create sort of geographically based presentations. Timelines, of course, we're all familiar with what timelines are. And so the same company that made the mapping software that we looked at also makes Storyline. And it's a similar idea. You can basically go ahead and establish a timeline from one date to another date, drop pins in along the way, and then you can populate each of those pins with information, either text information or photographic information or whatever. And it starts out with a simple spreadsheet. You can actually use data from Google Sheets. So if you go ahead and make a spreadsheet in Google Sheets that has all of your years and then your corroborating data along the way through the spreadsheet, you can simply upload that to Storyline, and then that will populate your Storyline for you. And so you can see that. Let's look at this timeline here. Check out this example. So this is a timeline of the history of women in computing. And so you can see that it allows you to put in some background images, a header, some explanatory information, and then we can jump through the timeline, of course, starting with Ada Lovelace, and then making our way through to the invention of the first computer, and so on and so forth. And you can click along through a variety of different areas. It embeds videos and all sorts of other stuff. So it's a great way to give a presentation or simply track something historically or over a timeline. And it's a pretty great tool. Now, this is obviously a side-scrolling linear timeline. If you want to do something a little more visually rich, there's this website here, Tiki-Taki. Not only do they have a fun name, but the timelines they offer are a little more visually interesting. I will say that the free version of Tiki-Taki, it is free, but unlike some of these tools, this free version has very limited functionality. So what I would say about Tiki-Taki is try out the free version. If you seem to like it and you're willing to pay some money for the more robust version, then you can do that. But you're not going to get a ton of functionality out of the free version. It's really more of a trial. But that being said, it is a fun piece of software that not only makes linear timelines similar to what we just looked at with Timeline.js, but as you can see, they're a little more visually rich and interesting. And you can scroll through the timeline this way, you drop in your pins, and then you fill those pins as slides with information, photography, and everything else. And then if you want something a little more visually dynamic, they have a 3-dimensional version like this one, which works the same way, allows you to establish your timeline first and then drop in your pins, but you screw it in sort of 3 dimensions with these semi-transparent slides that sort of come at you in space, which you can then click on and get more information as you go along. Okay, so those are our timeline creation tools.
Chris, are any of those timelines able to be embedded into other software, whether it's Google Slides, Spark, PowerPoint, so that way they're easy to access and easy for students to view in class?
Yeah, each of those, Storyline, Timeline JS, and TikiTaki all have export functionality, which allows you to embed them in other places, either into websites or into presentations or whatever. So that they don't have to live just on that website. You can export them, usually through a share link, similar to how you would embed a YouTube video, but it still technically lives on YouTube, but it's accessible through the share link, same sort of idea.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to video editing and publishing. This has really been an expansive area of digital tools because of the rise of smartphones. The cameras that are on smartphones, of course, are better quality than half of the HD video cameras we were using 15 years ago. And so it's much easier now to capture video digitally and then do something with it. Now, there's a lot of onboard editing tools with our smartphones, but sometimes you want to get into something a little more advanced than just a simple editing tool. And so some of these video editing tools, and not all of these are editing, some of these are publishing as well as video libraries. But a lot of them are easy to get to and surprisingly free. So if you have an Apple computer, iMovie comes free with Macs. This here is iMovie. I use this to edit all my online lectures. I was actually working on one right before you guys got here. And so you can see that it's a multi-track video editing tool that you can put in titles, you can add transitions, you can put in your actual video. It immediately separates out the audio from your video into a separate adjacent track that you can adjust the volume on. You can add additional music tracks in 2 different places. It supports 2 different music tracks simultaneously. The linked one, which you can see here in green, and then there's a running one at the bottom, which would be for more like a background soundtrack. And it supports overlay images. So you can see I dropped in an image here that as they scroll along, it pops up for a few seconds and then comes back down again. iMovie is amazingly easy to use, has a bunch of built-in features. And then when you're done with it, right from iMovie, you can go ahead and share it to YouTube directly, as well as Vimeo or Facebook. You can email it to people, or you can just give yourself a downloadable file that you can put somewhere else. Now, if you don't have a Mac and you're still looking for the same kind of free functionality, you want to take a look at OpenShot. This here is OpenShot. So OpenShot is a video editor that also works on Macs and Linux computers, but really is great for PCs, for Windows computers. It, as you can see by looking at the demo image here, is extremely similar in the way it's set up to iMovie. It has the same sort of 3 basic windows: the timeline window, the view window, and the media window. And it's all drag and drop WYSIWYG, right? WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. And so that type of video editing software is pretty easy to pick up. So if you don't have a Mac and you want to do the same sort of stuff on your PC, OpenShot is pretty great. Now, other times in the world of video, you of course aren't necessarily shooting all the video yourself, but maybe you want video of something that you can't necessarily go out and shoot, like a couple of lionesses walking together in the Serengeti. I can't get there right now, and the lionesses don't seem to like me, so I definitely wouldn't video them. But I can get a free video clip of them walking along right here on the Videvo website. I have no idea if it's pronounced Videvo or Videvo, but we'll go with Videvo. It sounds nicer. And so they offer a ton of free video clips that are free to use. Now, we're going to talk about free to use a little bit for a second here, because much of the stuff I'm going to show you next falls under this website here, which is Creative Commons, which you might be familiar with. I know Dr. Nevius is super familiar with this. Creative Commons, you could probably give us a whole lesson on this. Creative Commons, of course, is a nonprofit organization that basically works towards collecting all sorts of content, photography, videos, audio, tons of content that is free for reuse for educational, or I should say nonprofit purposes. So if you are building something or making something and you're not trying to make money off of it, then you can use the content that has the Creative Commons licensing system. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's basically the long and the short of it. And so websites like Videvo, they use the Creative Commons licensing system, and therefore all of these clips are available for use by your students for free. And you can see here that they also have music snippets as well as sound snippets, similar to what we looked at last week with Audio Archive and whatnot. So all you got to do is make yourself an account, do a little searching, and you can find some great videos. My only warning about Videvo is that when you search for a particular topic, the results screen will show you a combination of both free and paid videos. You have to make sure you click on the ones that say free in the corner, so you're not accidentally grabbing a paid one. It's not going to charge you anything right away, but you don't want to waste your time with things you're going to have to pay for. So just click on the free ones. Okay, the other video thing I want to point out is Flipgrid, which is something you might be familiar with. Flipgrid has become a very popular short video tool, which allows people to set up sort of video environments for their students to share short videos, kind of like Instagram or Snapchat, but in a more educational environment. Now, Flipgrid, of course, can be difficult for some students because it's just more opportunity for them to have to stick their face on video, which not everybody's comfortable with, but it is a tool that can be used. So I'm just going to play this part of their video here, which sort of shows you how it goes. You know, you set it up, you invite your students to participate through their student emails. You can share the code so they can access it. And then once they're in, they can start sharing videos. You, as the teacher and the owner of the Flipgrid page, sets up the parameters if there's a prompt that they have to follow or whatever, and it allows them to make and upload these short little videos that, of course, are sort of the content that they create in response to whatever you put up there. So there you go. So that is Flipgrid. All right, before we move on, any questions about video editing and publishing tools? Has anybody used Flipgrid? Did you all fall asleep? You're all asleep, right? I know you're asleep. I can hear the snore.
Was it Lindsay Vago who used Flipgrid a lot last year, Chris?
Yeah, I think she did. She really liked it a lot and put a lot of. I think she did a few projects in it.
Yeah, I've used it. I've used it in classes many times.
Yeah.
Verna's used it a lot too. Verna DeLauer. She showed it to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun tool. I think one of the things that's attractive about it to students is that it is familiar in the way that some social media platforms are, whereas sort of long form video is maybe a little more foreign to them. So I think that's one thing that's attractive to it. But, you know, I think tools like that, I would definitely sort of suss out with the students how willing they are to engage in that sort of a thing, because I know video can be difficult for some students.
So I just have a question, and I don't know. Are we talking about, so it's tools, so it's probably both and all. Are these tools for me to use as an educator to, to liven up my presentations, to have a little bit more engagement in the classroom, and or are these tools for students to use to, do their work, to provide back content to show what their engagement is?
Well, I think our premise here is both. You know, the foremost thought in presenting these is not for anybody to feel like, oh, I have to start using these tools, but more to sort of reflect on the things you already do in class, the types of assignments, the type of projects, the type of interactions you've already structured for your students, and just sort of think, do any of these tools feel like they would be appropriate for those, and could they enrich that experience in some way? So in that way, it's for you to embellish, change, enliven things you already do. But then on the other hand, for students, if you write projects in a way where you're not dictating a specific means of delivery, if you don't say to your students, you have to do this in PowerPoint, right? If you say instead, you have to simply use some kind of digital presentation tool, and then you give them options, you show them some of these, then it gives them a little more freedom in terms of how they're going to respond to what you're requiring of them, and maybe be a little more motivated to do it.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's
Okay,
actually
moving-
a great question, Jed, because that's what a lot of people wonder about when they see a presentation like Chris's. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on. All right, next category. As you can see by the alphabet here, we're getting to the end. So visual media. Now this encompasses a variety of different things, and we did already talk about Creative Commons, so we sort of understand what they're all about. And one of the problems that students run into, particularly in visual classes, or pretty much any class, is that they inadvertently steal things that don't belong to them and therefore breach the plagiarism rules. And so I spend a lot of time with my students talking to them about where they can find things that are appropriate for them to use. And some places you wouldn't imagine, like for example, Flickr is known as a website for professional photographers to upload full resolution versions of their photography, which can be used for, you know, gallery presentations or self-promotion or whatnot. And so simply by that definition, you would imagine that everything on Flickr you cannot use. It's copywritten and therefore you can't touch it. But the truth of the matter is that Flickr offers the option to its photographers to tag some of their photographs as Creative Commons licensed and therefore free for people to use for educational or nonprofit purposes. So if you were to just go to Flickr and type in a subject like dogs, for example, you get all sorts of great dog photography, but most of this is owned by the photographers, of course, and you can't use it. But if you go over here to the licensing pull-down menu and simply choose one of these other options that's appropriate, yes, I know I'm looking at dogs, don't get jealous. You can choose all Creative Commons, and then that will therefore sort your results by photographs that do have the Creative Commons license that you're therefore allowed to use in your project, so long as you cite them, of course, which is what I always tell my students. Like, I can download this beautiful photo of this dog, but I have to make sure that I cite the user, which of course you can get their information down here and put that in your citations. Now, outside of something that you wouldn't expect like Flickr, there are websites that are specifically built for this sort of thing. There is Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S, there is Pixabay, and there is Unsplash. Now, I'm zipping through all three of those because they basically do the exact same thing. All three of them are stock photography websites that have Creative Commons licensing that allows you to download any of these for use. And so stock photography has a long and interesting history in that in the pre-digital age, stock photography used to be made available from, you know, professional stock photography companies like Corbis and whatnot, where you could request chromes, which are like giant reverse negatives of photographs for large amounts of money. And so they weren't really great for students to use. I remember when I was at Mass College of Art in undergraduate school, we used to get the catalogs, but you certainly couldn't afford the photographs. But through the birth of the internet, of course, lots of stock photography companies started going online, and companies like this, like Unsplash, Pexels, and Pixabay, allow you to essentially access photos that the photographers have made available through the Creative Commons licensing system. And there's some really beautiful photographs on here. And you simply choose the photograph. What I love about Unsplash is you choose the photograph you want, you go to the download button, you pick the size you want. So I'd like a nice 1920 size. It will download it on my computer. And while it's downloading, it goes ahead and pops up the citation for me at the bottom. So I can make sure that my students are citing where it's coming from. All they have to do is simply copy the citation by clicking that button, and then they can go paste it into their Word document or wherever they're keeping track of where they're getting their work from. And so once it does that, it downloads the photo onto your computer, and now you have it for use in whatever projects you're working on, which is great. Now, aside from downloading free-to-use photographs, sometimes you want to search for where a photograph comes from. This website is called TinEye. So let's say you've got some photos on your computer, you've had them for a while, they're not your photos, you got them from somewhere and you don't remember where the heck you got them from. And you want to use them in a project, but you're like, I don't know if I'm okay to use this. I don't know if I'm going to be ripping somebody off. So you can simply upload whatever photo you have to TinEye. Just hit the old upload button, give it a second to access your file system. I have like 72 websites open, so it's running a little slow at the moment. And once it allows you to do that, you can simply go to downloads, grab the photo you have in question, or go anywhere in your files and give it a second, and it will search the internet and it will find where on the internet that photo lives. So you can see that that photo of that dog I just downloaded lives on 175 different websites, and it will show you each and every one of them. Now, some of them are obvious, like we just got it from Unsplash, so that's where it is. But it shows you a bunch of other places where it lives, and so you can see where it comes from and whether or not it's something that you think is free to use. Unsplash also has this other great feature that if you are a photographer, you can make an account for yourself, upload your photographs, and you can set it to automatically search the internet once in a while to see if anybody has ripped off your photographs, which is kind of useful. Okay, so outside of photography, sometimes students need access to other types of imagery, like pictograms or icons. And so this here is the Noun Project, which is a great website that, again, is through the Creative Commons licensing system and allows you to find icons and pictograms in all sorts of categories. So again, we'll stick with the dog theme because my dogs seem really invested in this today. So there's 7,885 icons of dogs you can use, and you simply choose the dog icon that you want. It opens up this editor, which allows you to either keep it as is, or you can go through their color palette system and change the color of it. And you could also do some minor editing to it, like rotating it a little bit or flipping it in the other direction, like that. And then once you're happy with it, you can hit get this icon and it will download it to your computer as a PNG file. PNG files are image files that support transparency. As you can see here, there's nothing behind this dog. So that can be used very nicely in any sort of documents, presentations, Word documents, websites, you name it. You do have to make an account on Noun Project to actually do the downloading, but once you do that, it's easy to do. Okay, so that takes care of visual media. Any questions on that area before we move on to our final area?
Chris, this is Melinda. I have just a brief question. Do we buy any licenses for this kind of visual media, but also the one you were talking about with the, creating videos and stuff?
So most of the stuff I'm showing here, pretty much all of the stuff I'm showing here is license free. It's entirely free to use or very inexpensive. All it requires you to do is sign up for an account. And some of them, like Unsplash, for example, you don't even have to sign up. You can just go to Unsplash and use it. They don't even want to know any information about you, which is great. But no, none of these require any licensing.
Okay.
Now, some of them, like we were talking about Screencast-O-Matic, if you want the more robust version, that requires licensing, but they all have at least a free tier that you can use without having to do anything.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to our last category. So, well, actually, second to last category. So let's talk about web design, hosting, and publishing. So as you may or may not know, one of the things I teach is web design. And so web design software on a professional level is pretty complex and pretty expensive. Adobe Dreamweaver, Adobe XD, all of these things are pretty pricey and have a very big learning curve, much to the chagrin of my students sometimes. Meanwhile, there are third-party WYSIWYG drag and drop systems that you might be familiar with, like Squarespace or Wix, which are much easier to use, but require sort of a running subscription. You have to pay for them monthly. Squarespace is about $12 a month, and Wix is about $25 a month. There's a free version of Wix, but it plasters advertising all over your website, which is kind of unappealing. You can use WordPress, which is entirely free, and you can, of course, start with templates in WordPress and simply edit those templates. But WordPress is also really great if you know a little bit of HTML and CSS and want to sort of get under the hood and do some coding. All that being said, there's an even simpler version that I am a huge fan of that I actually use in a couple of my non-web design classes, like digital storytelling, and that is Medium. So I'm going to sort of jump to that right now. Now, Medium is kind of a Trojan horse web design program because it really isn't designed for web design, but you can kind of trick it out to do that. Now, Medium is sort of like YouTube in that you can go to YouTube and you can just consume other people's videos and just be a consumer of videos, or you can make your own YouTube channel and use that to be a platform for your own videos, right? Whether you want to be a YouTube star or if you just want a place to stick your videos and share them with people. Medium works the same way, but Medium is all about writing. And along with the writing comes other kinds of web-based content like photography and video and sound and whatnot. So you can go to Medium as a consumer and simply just read through articles articles that you find interesting from a variety of amateur to professional writers, whatever you want. Or you can go ahead and make yourself a Medium account and set up your own profile. This is mine that's loading here. Come on, internet, you can do it. I think my dogs are watching Netflix, which is why it's so slow. They're always watching Netflix. It's terrible. Oh, come on. Jesu Christo mia makikatsa stavajan. There we go. Okay, so this here's my Medium page. And so it allows you to essentially build your own content onto your own Medium web page, which you can then share with people. Now, as a web design tool, I'm not going to tell you it's the most visually bombastic thing in the world. It's not. It's just a scrolling modular website builder. So it's just module, scroll, module, scroll, module, scroll. But what's really kind of neat about it is that when you get into each entry, it allows you to do a variety of stuff. It supports text, which this here is a micro story that I wrote. This here, it embeds a SoundCloud file. This is the audio of that same story, which then has some cover art built into it. It also supports photography, graphics, whatever. And you can share this with people. It's live on the web, so it's available everywhere. Unlike the websites you can make in Spark, it's not what you would call a single-use website. It's available to the public. People can share it on various social media. If they have a Medium account, they can save it to their collection. And you can get a little bit of feedback at the bottom. People can leave comments, they can leave claps, et cetera, et cetera. The other cool thing about Medium, aside from making your own individual web page, is you can make a publication, which you can then have other people contribute to and use that. This is the publication that I build for my digital storytelling class. And my students, I assign all my students as writers to the publication, and then they can contribute stories to it. And you, as the owner of the publication, you act as sort of the editor. And so all stories that come into your publication, they pop up here at the top as needing to be edited and approved, and then they get published in your publication, which is pretty great. So it's a great way to sort of do some website building for some specific purposes and make it available to the world without really needing to know anything about website building, which is pretty awesome. The tools are super easy to use. Okay, and then the last thing I want to show you is under the last category, which is writing. Obviously, we know about sort of desktop publishing software like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Apple Pages. Those we're all pretty familiar with. But some other writing tools just sort of help us with our writing. And one of my favorites is Espresso, not to be confused with the Italian beverage, which I am such a lover of. Basically, it's a simple to use website. It has very little functionality. You take a piece of text. This here, of course, is the Raven, because I always have the Raven handy, because why not? And you paste the text in there, and then simply hit analyze and give it a second, and it gives you this entire grammatical breakdown on the text. What's great about it is if I want to sort of see, oh, look, the Raven has 31% weak verb usage, which I'm sure Poe would be thrilled to hear. You click on that, and it highlights all the weak verbs, which is pretty great. If I want to go down and take a look at the frequently used words, oh, look, surprise, nevermore is used a lot. So it highlights that. And then so on and so forth. It's a really great way to sort of break down the writing and sort of help your students learn about what they do when they write or analyze other people's writing. Okay, so that's the whole kit and caboodle. At the bottom of the handout, which we don't really get into, but you are certainly free to explore our tool ecosystems, which are the more expensive professional grade collection of tools that exist in the professional world. And I always tell students, you have to be familiar with these because out in professional jobs, they use these a lot. The Adobe Creative Cloud, naturally, for creative type stuff, and of course, Microsoft Office 365, both of which offer a ton of great tools. And we are lucky at the school that we have free access to Microsoft Office 365 and all the wonderful tools. But outside of a school environment, that is not always the case. You have to pay for it. So that's why I don't really highlight it here necessarily. Okay, so that is a whole bunch of tools at a breakneck pace. I realize that's a truckload and a half to go over, but your goal at this point is to take some time between now and next week and explore some of them. Whatever you're drawn to, whatever you find interesting, whatever's speaking to you. And then I'll send you out the survey and you can kind of let us know what you would like us to spend more time on, either specific tools, tool categories, discussions about tools, whether it be ethical uses or whatever. All right, so Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you. There you go.
Thanks so much, Chris. I mean, I've sat in on this presentation 3 times now, and I always take furious notes because most of the notes are, you should explore this more, Paul. And guess what? I never seem to find the time for it. But, you know, Ngram seems amazing to me. I talk about the enduring popularity and legacy of the Beatles. You know, I could use that in my class, and I haven't. And I could type in Beatles versus Elvis Presley, and you know, look at how the Beatles have endured the way Elvis Presley may not have. You know, things like that. The text analyzing tools are amazing. You know, for song lyrics, obviously for poems, for all sorts of things. I'm continually blown away by how much there is out there and how little I'm taking advantage of these things. So, you know, I feel like I've got a lot of homework to do, and you are all probably feeling the same way. But again, don't get overwhelmed. You know, pick and choose some things that you think are going to work best for your class, and they're going to be helpful, not just for the sake of using them, but are really going to help your pedagogy. That's what we're all about here in Ideal.
Yeah, one thing I'd also like to add too, that sort of came up earlier, is that this cohort, you guys have the benefit of 2 previous cohorts who have already used some of these and do use some of these in their classes. And so we can very easily ask some of them to sort of come back and show us what they've learned, how they use it, and how they leverage it in their class. So I think that would be helpful for examples or whatnot.
Yeah, for example, I've already done a little survey for the with the existing first 2 cohorts, and you know, Sarah D'Angelo Antonio would like to present on hypothesis, you know, one of the annotation tools that we looked at before. So it won't just be us jabbering away at you, it will be your colleagues presenting on things that they have actually begun to use in their classes. So it's 5:02, so I think we're all done. And for the week, and look for Chris's survey, and we shall see you next week.
Paul, one thing, if
Yep.
anyone wants to see, if you go to the Ideal on Canvas, it says faculty pages and Lindsay stuff. I mean, there's a ton there. I won't share, but if you just go to the Ideal page, Canvas, and you click on the front link, under Ideal Links and Resources, Ideal Participant Created Pages. There's a lot of stuff from our previous cohorts that's there.
Right. That's always a good place to check out what your peers have been doing.
Yeah.
And if you just wait a second, if people are still on the broadcast here, I am going to share the screen. Hold on, just give me a second here. And this, I hope you can see this now. This is what Frank was talking about. You see all the people, and you'll notice that your names are in there too. But if you look at someone like Lindsay Vago that we were mentioning, Lindsay's ears are undoubtedly burning because we mentioned her a lot in here, but she was a great member of the 2nd cohort. Here, she incorporates all sorts of things that she actually used in class. So that's a good way to see, again, what your colleagues have been doing with their knowledge that they picked up in Ideal. So anyway, thank you, and we shall see you next week.
Have a good weekend.